Peter took his son to see an ex's show, and every call I made to him went straight to voicemail. He brushed me off saying he was busy, yet turned around and posted a happy family of 3 picture with his ex on Twitter. Meanwhile, I was at home, accidentally overdosing on medication and nearly dying. After a narrow escape from death, I laid the signed divorce papers in front of Peter. He didn't believe I was serious about leaving and mocked me, "You think you can get by without me?" But I was resolute. He and our son stared at me coldly, expecting I'd eventually give up and come back, but I just kept moving farther away and never looked back. After bringing up divorce with Peter, he started coming home less. Just as his photos with Ruby at her show went viral, I was at home sorting through meds prescribed by the doctor. Alice, who was looking after me, seemed hesitant to speak. Just as her shift ended, she couldn't help but say, "Sandy, a little quarrel is normal for couples, but push it too far and you only drive people away." After organizing my meds, I thanked her and saw her out. I opened a bottle of red wine, and the more I drank, the clearer things became. I called Peter a few times. He didn't answer, just replied with a dismissive busy. By the time I finished 2 bottles, I staggered upstairs. At the bedside stood a photo from our happiest times, 2 beaming faces close together, painfully ironic against the current reality. I placed the picture frame face down and walked into the bathroom. Warm water enveloped me as my phone buzzed beside me. I picked it up to see a news alert. I swiped it away and opened Instagram to find Peter had updated his status just 10 minutes earlier. He'd posted a big group photo featuring his parents, Ruby's parents, and in the first row, Peter on the right, Ruby on the left, and our son, Andrew, standing in the middle. Andrew was holding both of their hands, smiling happily for the camera. They looked like the real family. The phone slipped from my grasp into the water, sinking slowly to the bottom. I leaned back in the tub, feeling dizzy, my stomach burning. I thought about the past decade with him, once seen as the perfect couple, now almost strangers. I used to shine bright on stage just like Ruby. The first 2 years with Andrew were the happiest of my life. I returned to work when Andrew turned 2. My parents drove me to the airport, but we ended up in a terrible accident. From that point, my life plummeted. I lost my parents and was left physically impaired. Lying in a hospital bed, hearing I might never walk again, I sank into despair, losing the will to live. The pain was unbearable. I forced a smile during the day, telling those who comforted me that surviving was enough, but each night I tortured myself with the thought of what I might have done to deserve such suffering. After the accident, there were those who sympathized and others who took pleasure in my misery. Some said I was overly ambitious and had a child just to keep Peter, rushing back to work to keep up appearances. Others pitied me, saying my parents worked so hard raising me only to lose their lives because of me. Every comforting word felt backhanded, and their covert sneers rolled through my mind like an ever-growing snowball, almost crushing what was left of my will to survive. Changing my bandages was excruciating. I'd grip the bed rails, crying out in agony, telling Peter I couldn't take it anymore. He'd hold me, tears in his eyes, comforting me like a child. During my hospital days, Peter's career was taking off, yet he unhesitatingly dropped everything to stay by my side day and night. He'd said money could be earned again, but he only had one of me. He was my rock, my everything, my sole dependence. I foolishly thought surviving was enough, getting through the surgeries, healing wounds, recovering from the risk of paralysis. Even after rehabilitation, I faced a diminished life with a permanently changed body. All past glory dissolved like bubbles. I passed out in the bathtub. When I woke, it was to banging on the door. I was still draped over the tub, the water had somehow drained away. The floor was a mess of vomit, mixed with undissolved pills, the stink in the air unbearable. My stiff, cold hands gripped the tub as I slowly got out. As I pulled on a bathrobe, I glanced at the mirror and saw a ghost staring back, damp hair, pale face, lifeless eyes. Right by my mouth was the dried-up evidence of my stomach's rebellion. I emerged from the bathroom to find daylight streaming in, the sun high in the sky. The banging outside had turned to pounding. Andrew's voice called from outside, "Mom, get up." I turned the doorknob, and he burst in with his backpack. "Mom, hurry, I'm gonna be late." His words cut off abruptly. He covered his nose and mouth, stepping back. His eyes scanned me up and down with a frown. "You're so dirty. What's that smell in here?" "Mom, you don't do anything at home, at least keep it clean." I forced a stiff smile, stepping back. "Sorry." He caught sight of my pallor, and redirected his gaze. "Forget it. You don't have to come to the school event." I wanted to agree, but a wave of nausea rushed up. I barely had time to open my mouth before I vomited again, with my world going black. My last vision was of Andrew pressed against the wall, fear etched on his face. I'd overdosed on prescription meds and alcohol, winding up in the emergency room. I only fully regained consciousness 3 days later. The hospital room was dead silent. Not a soul around. Jane arrived with food, tears of concern spilling from her eyes. "You shouldn't harm your body like this. You're lucky to be alive." My voice ached, rasped as I tried explaining it was the alcohol's fault, not a suicide attempt. She didn't believe me. Nobody did. Even Peter thought it was another melodramatic ploy for attention. When I was discharged, Peter picked me up. Andrew was in the back seat, treating me with such careful apprehension. "Mom, Dad got your favorite cake," he said softly. I glanced at the fancy cake box on the back seat, murmuring a thank you. Peter was on the phone, his profile stern, fingers tapping idly on the steering wheel. Adjusting my seatbelt, he took the buckle from me and clicked it into place. At that moment, we were really close, and I instinctively leaned back. He noticed, paused, and looked at me. I turned my head to glance out the window. By evening, I realized Peter had moved back to the master bedroom. After I showered, I found him making the bed. "You're sleeping here?" "Yeah. Then I'll go to the guest room." Before I could walk away, Peter pulled me back, unusually gentle. "Don't make a fuss. We've been in separate rooms for over half a year. Physical closeness feels like a distant memory." Sharing the bed, we each stayed on our side. I woke up in the middle of the night, thirsty, and noticed his side was empty. I got up to get some water. Through the slightly open balcony door, I heard Peter talking on the phone. I hadn't heard him speak in such a gentle tone in a long time, even with a touch of laughter. Just handle it as you see fit. No worries, we'll discuss it later." There was a pause, and his tone shifted. "Got discharged today, it's going okay. Don't worry." After drinking, I returned to bed. A while later, Peter came back, and the bed dipped on his side. Just as I was about to drift off, an arm wrapped around my waist. I woke up startled, quickly sitting up and pushing him away. Peter turned on the bedside lamp, sitting up with that familiar expression. His eyes were filled with displeasure, trying hard to hold it in. "What now?" I rubbed my forehead, saying nothing yet. Peter closed his eyes and asked, exasperated, "I've tried so hard to meet all your demands, what else do you want?" My nails dug into my palms, feeling utterly humiliated. The day after I got discharged, Peter's mom visited me, along with one of his relatives. Everyone was polite. The elegantly dressed and made-up Betty treated me like her own daughter in front of others, showing concern with eyes full of pity. Behind closed doors, she sighed to the relative, "I still envy your family. It's a pity, if it were Ruby back then, it would have been better." Everyone knew each other well. No fate, don't even know if there ever will be. I was reviewing the divorce papers my lawyer drafted, gripping my phone, pretending not to hear. A week later, I found a place, packed my things, prepared the divorce agreement, and reminded Peter to come home early. That day, it poured. I waited at home from 5 until almost 10. Peter came in smelling of alcohol. Seeing me on the couch, he paused, seemingly recalling I had asked him to come home early. He glanced at the time, apologized, "Something came up, I forgot." "It's all right, you're back now." I handed him the documents, take a look, sign if it's okay. Peter took it and froze when he saw divorce agreement. You mean it? Yeah. He tossed the document onto the table, sarcastically asking, think you can live without me? Not your concern. He looked at me, anger growing, coldly laughing, play hard to get too often, it gets annoying. Are you sure? Sure. Okay. His face turned cold, quickly signing his name on the agreement and pushing it back to me. As you wish, don't regret it. Peter stood up, suddenly remembered the kid. What about Andrew? I said, ask the kid. Let him choose. Regarding compensation, I only took what was fair, not more. For Andrew's custody, if he wanted it, I wouldn't fight. If he didn't, I'd take Andrew with me. But mostly, the Peters wouldn't give him to me. Andrew and I were close before he turned 2, but after my accident, I lost my parents, my mental state was terrible, and I avoided seeing him. During rehab, I asked Andrew to visit, but he looked at me with unfamiliarity and fear. Throughout my long recovery, I wasn't fit to care for him. Andrew grew up with the Peters, now 7, raised well, but not close to me, with a hint of disdain. Even if I wanted to take him, he might not be willing. Sure enough, when Andrew found out about our divorce, he was surprised but not unmanageable. I squatted down, asking, do you want to come with Mom? Andrew stayed silent, his small hands clenched nervously. He said, Mom, I'll wait for you to come back. And if I don't come back? He was sure, you will. At the registry's entrance, Peter paused, offering me one last chance to reconsider, think it through before getting out. I replied simply, open the door. After leaving the office, he didn't ask where I was going, and I didn't say. Peter got in his car and drove away. Post-divorce, I moved to the west side of town. Deciding to divorce Peter wasn't because I came around. On the contrary, I needed to because I couldn't. I feared staying any longer. One day I'd snap and drag him to hell with me. When extreme thoughts repeatedly surfaced, I saw a psychologist. She suggested trying to let myself go. Leave Peter, leave that home, and give myself time. Treat every day as if it's the last, doing whatever comes to mind. After trying meaningful and meaningless things, decide what to do with this mundane life. Peter wasn't worth wrecking my life over. On the 10th day after leaving, which was also the 10th day looking out from my upstairs window, the rain stopped, the sun emerged, people returned to the streets. I opened my door, attempting to go out for the first time. Let them talk. The whispers and gossip won't reach me. Nobody here recognizes the old Sandy, no one compares my past and present. When life eventually ends, they'll say the one who died was a cripple, that cripple died. 3 months flew by. During this time, stepping outside, I embraced various challenges. It's like I'm pushing myself to the limit, stepping into the crowd, taking in their looks, their curious questions, and those unreadable stares. Every time I feel emotionally overwhelmed, I hide at home and drink. When I'm tipsy, it feels like 2 people in my head are having a big argument. One says, if you can't handle it, just let it go. The other one shouts, why should you let it go? You've already come this far. Why quit now? 2 months after the divorce, I went for a follow-up appointment. The doctor said I seemed better. We talked for a while. She said I wasn't scared of people's different looks. I just couldn't accept my own flaws, like Peter. By the 3rd month after the divorce, I got to know my neighbor Alice. She's retired, with 2 kids, and her daughter runs a cake shop at the community entrance. Alice has a really cool mindset and a great sense of humor. We talked about my leg. She said, even if one leg's not great, you've still got 3 others that are, right? When we talked about career regrets, she said most of life isn't spent on stage, it's behind the scenes. If you can't be an actor, be the audience. While eating her homemade dumplings, I smiled so much that I felt like crying. We became good friends. She took me shopping at the 8 p.m. sale at the supermarket, shouting for me to pick up the pace in the crowd. She even got me a part-time gig at her daughter's shop, and when business was good, I got a little cake as a bonus. Alice dragged me into the community dance group. She said I could help guide the grandma crew. I helped them with moves and sometimes choreographed their dances. Somehow, I found myself part of the senior group in the community. I used to be the one they whispered about. Now I sat among them, listening to them chat about others. Suddenly, equality took on a new meaning for me. The dance group got more organized. They even got uniforms. With connections from Alice, they found a guy to take nice photos and videos. One day, while photos were being taken, Alice pointed to me and said, "Let's get a few shots of Sandy too." The others agreed. I instinctively waved my hand in refusal when they turned the camera on me. Hands on my shoulders, Alice smiled and said, "Just strike a couple of poses, you'll look great." Chimed in the others, "Yeah, no pressure." I was nervous, my throat dry. It felt like my first big performance. My heart was racing and I felt dizzy. I couldn't find a natural pose, but no one rushed me. The photographer finally suggested setting the atmosphere with music, then the ladies started dancing with fans in hand. With them as the background, I lifted my skirt a little and struck some basic dance poses. The clicks of the camera were accompanied by praise, "Good, great, amazing. Be more natural, and you'll look even better. You could go pro." My smile was genuine, and in that moment, I glanced toward the camera. Just then, the music stopped, and a familiar mom filled the air. I looked towards the voice and saw Andrew, alongside Peter and Ruby. Maybe 3 months apart had made it different, but Andrew seemed excited to see me. He ran over and jumped into my arms, calling me Mom in that adorable way he'd always had. I stroked his head, my heart melted. Ruby, smiling, suggested to Peter, "Let's take a walk and leave them some time together." Peter kept his eyes on me. I nodded, took Andrew's hand and walked away. Since leaving home, I had only video calls with Andrew. I never asked about Peter, and Andrew, maybe instructed by someone, never brought it up. I took Andrew to the cake shop by the community entrance. On the way, he eyed the surroundings and finally asked, "Mom, why are you here?" Before I could reply, he said, "It's so remote here, not pretty like where we live." I pushed the cake toward him, handing him a fork, and said, "Pretty isn't what matters most. What's important is that I'm happy here." He wiggled his little feet, took a bite of cake, and I asked, "Is it good?" Andrew nodded, took another bite. "It's good." His clear eyes looked at me with a touch of expectation. "Mom, when are you coming home?" I wiped some cream off his cheek and gently told him, "Mom and Dad are divorced, and now we all have our own lives." His feet stopped wiggling. I continued, "If you miss me, you can come stay with me." Andrew wasn't happy with that answer. Lips pursed, he looked upset. "I don't want that." "Don't want what?" "Parents being divorced, or not staying with me." I chose to shift the topic, asking about his recent life. He poked his cake with the spoon, messing it up. "I'm having a blast. Ruby Auntie often comes to play with me." My heart ached, but I forced a smile. "Oh, really?" Andrew nodded. "We went to amusement parks and the water park together. She buys me toys and got me a bunny. Ruby Auntie's cooking is great too, her ribs are delicious. She sings, paints, dances. Do you like her?" Andrew nodded again, like showing off a new favorite toy. "She's pretty and nice, buys me whatever I want, unlike stingy Mom." He took another bite of cake and wiggled his legs. "If you don't come home, I'll have Ruby Auntie stay over." It was like he was saying if I didn't play with him, he'd go find someone else. I touched his head. "You can have whoever you want over, but I'm not going back." His eyes widened, surprised. "You're not coming back? Who'll make bear cookies for me then?" "You can have them at my place," I said. Andrew put down the spoon, furrowed his brow. "Is Aunt Shin going to dress me every morning? It's been ages since anyone told me bedtime stories. What if I get sick? Dad has to work." I answered, you can learn to dress yourself. Dad can tell bedtime stories, and if you're sick, I'll come to take care of you. Andrew went quiet, then suddenly shoved the cake away angrily. This tastes awful, I've never had such a bad cake. I hate it here, it looks shabby and cheap. Let's talk it out, no need to throw a fit. He pushed me hard. I'm not throwing a fit, just telling the truth. Andrew picked up his watch to call his dad. I don't want to stay with Mom, Dad, come get me. Peter told him to wait a bit and he'd be right over. But Andrew couldn't wait. He tried to leave, and I stopped him. So he sat on the couch, with a stubborn frown, ignoring me on purpose. He's been spoiled by the adults around him, and when things don't go his way, he throws a tantrum, shows attitude, and waits for others to beg him to calm down. I sighed deeply, trying to be patient. If you ever need anything, others can do it for you, but you can always come to me too. He said, if you don't come back, then I don't want you. I fell silent, unsure what to say, watching him fiddle with his shoelaces. Andrew glanced at my legs under my long skirt and suddenly said, actually, you look more like a duckling. I think Aunt Ruby is the real princess. I was stunned, like a needle pierced my chest, even breathing hurt. Peter and Ruby arrived then, and Andrew ran over to hug Ruby. They looked like a perfect family of three, and I felt like the Wicked Witch picking on a kid. I stayed put, and Ruby glanced my way before leaving with the child. There were no customers in the cafe at that time, the owner was busy in the back, and Peter came over. What did you say to him? Without an answer from me, he softened a bit. He was happy on the way here. Really? I forced a smile, sorry for making him upset. Peter frowned, he's still young. Be more understanding and don't lose your temper on him. I rubbed my temples, stood up exhausted, and said, maybe it's best if you don't bring him to see me. I can't be a good mom. Peter was annoyed, you're his mom. If I don't bring him to see you, who should I take him to? I looked at him silently, and after a moment, he shifted the topic uncomfortably. So how's life here? Pretty good. Pretty good? He smirked, saw you taking pictures. Since when? Willing to try that now? After leaving you, I'm willing to try anything but dying. Peter's face darkened, and as I moved to leave, he blocked my way. Andrew thinks about you a lot. His tone was stiff. It's about time you arranged a visit home for him too. I pointed at Ruby outside, laughing a bit. Need someone to keep you company? Want me back as the mistress? Me and Ruby. Doesn't matter, I don't care. I walked past Peter and out the door. Ruby and Andrew were still outside, and when Andrew saw me, he hid behind Ruby. I kept walking, eyes straight ahead. Ruby called out to me, Miss Sandy, if you're looking to work in dance again, I can help you with some contacts. I stopped and smiled at her. With that spare time, why not focus on finding other married men? Seeing the shock on her face, I felt a smug satisfaction. As I walked on, tears suddenly welled up. Andrew, when he was just a kid, already knew that his mom had a leg that wasn't quite right. People would stare and ask questions during events at his kindergarten. Every time I got upset, he'd hug me and comfort me. Mom, your leg isn't ugly, you're a princess. But now, he said I looked like a duckling. After that unpleasant meeting, Andrew stopped even calling me on video. Outside, he's praised as a polite little gentleman, but at home, he lets loose, especially on me. Even when I try my best to teach him, he ends up more like Peter's family in every way. The guy who helped with photos that day, Ken, is a photographer and a short video creator. Ken asked if he could use my photo as part of his video. He showed me his account, and he's got hundreds of thousands of followers, focusing on couples' daily lives. His girlfriend Jane was in an accident a year ago, and she's still in a wheelchair, working hard on recovery. We talked for a long time, and finally, I agreed to Ken's request. When the finished video was out, Ken sent me the link. I saw myself in a clip at the end, skirt floating and fingers in the sunlight, smiling at the camera. Turns out moving forward isn't that hard. 2 weeks later, Ken posted another video on his account. I clicked the notification. This time the couple wasn't cheerful as usual. Their faces were serious, Jane on her wheelchair, eyes swollen and voice choking as she spoke about what happened to her. At the rehab hospital, she was assaulted by her attending doctor. Something buzzed in my ears, catching only a few words. A hospital, Dr. Ronald. Dark memories flooded back. I plunged into my past nightmares. Before the accident, I was independent, cheerful, and self-assured. After the accident, I was left with a disability, feeling inferior, suspicious, and emotionally unstable. I hid at home, avoiding people, often crying for no reason. It wasn't until I saw a doctor that I knew I had a psychological disorder. I don't know how many nights I woke up crying and hid in the bathroom. When I came out, Peter was always waiting. Bleary-eyed, he'd wipe my tears away, acting like everything was fine, urging me back to bed. Within minutes, Peter would be fast asleep beside me. But I'd toss and turn, unable to sleep. I realized then how my unstable emotions affected others too easily. Having lost my parents and barely survived, I didn't want my mental issues burdening Peter's family further. So, I tried hard to see doctors, take meds, and keep up with therapy, hoping to return to normal life soon. Peter was busy with work at the time, so when the old rehab place was too far, his family moved me to hospital with their friend, Ronald. Back then, Ronald was quite renowned, and getting an appointment with him wasn't easy. With his help, my situation got a lot better. Dr. Ronald seemed kind and gentle, around the same age as my dad. I quickly trusted him. By the second month of acupuncture, I fell asleep in the lounge. Ronald walked in alone and reached under my skirt. To this day, I can't calmly think about those memories. The first time he molested me, after I noticed, Ronald calmly pulled his hand away, saying he was just checking my leg. He was so straightforward that I doubted my judgment. I left the hospital, but the nauseating feeling wouldn't go away. I've gone through marriage and childbirth, I'm not some naive girl. Ronald clearly crossed the line, but I had built trust with him. Also, there was a lot of physical contact during therapy. I kept trying to convince myself I was imagining things, that it was a misunderstanding. But every time I closed my eyes, his murky eyes flashed in my mind. I felt uneasy day and night and began to fear going to the hospital, to face him. After a lot of struggle, I finally told Peter I wanted to switch hospitals. He asked why. I said Ronald did something that made me uncomfortable. Before I could explain, Peter rubbed his temples and brushed me off, saying, "I'm really busy right now. Can you just hang in there for me?" He didn't even ask what happened. Seeing how tired Peter looked, I swallowed back my words. I feared Ronald, and I feared Peter's family frowning at me, like I was a huge burden. The second time I was molested, it happened in the same therapy room. When Ronald's hand went in, I woke up immediately, frozen on the bed. He realized I was awake, and when I didn't resist, he continued. I screamed, but he clamped a hand over my mouth. The details are blurry, I only remember the chaos, people holding me down. Anything I could grab, I threw at Ronald in a frenzy. He, holding his bleeding forehead, glared at me from the doorway, telling the onlookers that I had a mental breakdown and attacked him. I was a mess, trembling and crying, clinging to Alice's sleeve, speaking incoherently. Alice seemed to understand, yet also not. It wasn't until Peter arrived, and I calmed down in his arms, that I told him what happened. Ronald molested my injured leg, the one with atrophied muscles and ugly scars. I'll never forget the hesitation in Peter's eyes at that moment. His first reaction was disbelief. But eventually, Peter did call the police at my insistence. Ronald adamantly claimed he was just doing his job and didn't know why I got upset. He was a well-reputed doctor. I was a patient with mental issues. No one believed me. I had no proof of what happened in that room. People only saw my outburst. Ronald, with a bandaged head, looked like he'd been wronged. He pointed at my leg, mockingly saying in front of everyone, even if I wanted to, I wouldn't go for a leg like that. All eyes turned to me, and in that moment, I felt like a rat in the gutter. It didn't matter if I swore on my life. No one believed me. They judged me, my looks, my clothes, and whether I was even attractive enough for a molester. Their scrutiny felt like being violated all over again. The whole affair eventually just faded away. Betty tried to comfort me, asking if maybe I'd taken too much medication and was hallucinating. She suggested I might be overthinking things, that the doctor handled many patients each day. She advised me to keep the peace, reminding me that Dr. Ronald was a connection we had pulled strings to get. If it got out of hand, she said, perhaps he could apologize privately. She told me Peter's career had been delayed repeatedly because of me, and now that it was finally taking off, here I was with this issue. The room door was closed, but in the window reflection, I saw a familiar figure standing outside. He listened to everything, but never came in. Everyone wanted me to get better, but no one treated me like a regular person. I cried, wishing I had just amputated my leg earlier. I researched if it was still possible to have the surgery. With Peter away on a business trip, the doctor called him when I went for a consultation. Peter called me back, sounding cold and impatient. I forgot most of what he said, except for the last line. "Sandy, it's exhausting being around you all the time." I hung up, dazed, repeating to myself, "It's okay, let it go, you're still in one piece." He was right. No one has to revolve around me. Everything else is gone, I only have this home left. As long as Peter believes me, I told myself, then everything will be okay. In an overdue moment of intimacy, I couldn't help but think of being violated. I felt uncomfortable, the nausea churning inside me. With tears in my eyes, I asked him if he thought my leg was disgusting. Peter kissed me, telling me I was beautiful everywhere. When things got intense, I deliberately guided his hand over my scarred leg. Peter suddenly stopped. We locked eyes, and despair washed over me, confirming my worst fears. He didn't believe me. He never believed Ronald molested me from the start. It was something even he couldn't face. How could any man be interested in such an ugly thing? Whenever I struggled to move forward, Peter was busy hiding my flaws. Those who encouraged me couldn't accept my imperfections more than me. He loved me, but only the flaw-free version. Since then, I couldn't stand being close to Peter. Our relationship hit rock bottom, filled with endless cold wars and arguments. When I woke up, Jane's video was already trending. The comments section was on fire, with some people backing her and others accusing her of low-key attention-seeking. Some mocked Jane's appearance, saying she was plain, skinny, and in a wheelchair, claiming she was delusional for thinking a doctor was after her. Jane's video told a story strikingly similar to mine, but without enough proof. Her complaint to the hospital ended with promises of an investigation that never materialized. They decided to call the cops, but Ronald turned it around and accused them of slander. I watched her video repeatedly, browsed through the sarcastic comments. Whenever I close my eyes, I see Ronald's creepy, aggressive stare, hear his mocking words, "Little sis, don't be so sensitive." I couldn't sleep, day or night, until I saw Ruby's lengthy Facebook post. Ronald was her uncle. She passionately defended him, writing over 1,000 words praising his ethics and character. At the end, she subtly hinted at influencer couples stirring the pot and urged everyone not to discourage good doctors given the current tense doctor-patient relationship. Ruby was getting pretty popular online lately, a successor in ethnic dance, with solid skills and impressive performances, and a recent reality show appearance had boosted her fan base. Her support motivated people to attack Jane viciously, filling the comments with insults. I contacted Ken. On the phone, he told me they'd already called the police and were talking to a lawyer to gather evidence and pursue legal action. I bluntly asked, "Do you believe what your girlfriend is saying?" He hesitated for a moment, maybe tired of hearing this kind of question lately, but his voice was sincere. "Sis, please believe Jane. Doctors saved her life. She respects them greatly." We swear on our lives, we would never defame a life-saving, morally upright doctor for profit. If we lie, we deserve the worst. We'd rather not post online if we could resolve this quietly. She only tells me about the bullying because no one else believes her. As Ken's voice broke a little, he confessed, saying I believe her isn't enough. She needs an apology, Justice. I felt my eyes well up, and I softly told him, me too. I've been through something similar. If you need me, I'm here to help however I can. My ability to help Jane was limited, though. It had been nearly 2 years. At this point, reporting it wouldn't do much good given how things stand now, watching the people attack Jane. An idea hit me. I could appear as another victim, testify that Jane wasn't alone. After a lengthy mental preparation, I recorded my story on my phone, reading from a drafted script. Some details were fuzzy, needing me to dig deep into my memory. Pain felt like a slow knife, dulling away at me. The incident shattered not just my psyche and self-esteem, but my trust in the whole Andrew family. No one stood behind me as firmly as Ken did for Jane. Jane's existing publicity made my video garner attention quickly. Many tuned in, some seeking truth, others recognizing me from Ken's video, mocking whether Jane and I planned to form a duo. Others spread rumors that we were an influencer marketing team stunt. The comments were sometimes hideous, insinuating past associations with certain places, fueling gossip. Direct messages were just as invasive, drowning me in unsettling remarks. For safety, I stayed indoors. Alice from across the hall was away on a trip, and late at night, there was suddenly a knock at my door. Fresh from a shower, towel drying my hair, the knocking startled my heart into a rapid thump. I froze, not making a sound. When no response came, the knocking repeated, growing impatient. Swiftly, I sought my phone to call the police when Peter flashed on the screen. I opened the door to a weary-looking Peter, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Seeing me, he sighed in relief, nudging me inside and stepping in. Peter steadied my shoulders, scanning me head to toe. Why didn't you answer the phone? It's late. What's going on? I'm here to take you home. I blinked. Home? To where? Where else? Home. He gripped my hand, aiming to tug me out. I yanked back. Why do you have to freak out in the middle of the night? Saw your video. I'm back from out of state. Peter paused, smoothing his tone. Influencer stuff is complex. They've all got teams. Everything's driven by goals and profit. Don't get caught up in their mess. He seemed insistent about Ronald. I'll make sure you get an explanation. I couldn't help but laugh. If you'd told me this 2 years ago, I'd probably have cried into your arms. But now. I pointed to the door. Leave, it's not your concern. Sandy. His voice strained. Couldn't get a ticket, no direct train, you didn't answer calls, I drove over 10 hours here, and you want me to leave? His shirt was creased, his face worn, shadowed by stubble. I said, never asked you to find me. Peter froze, hurt flickering on his face. He tried to bridge the gap. Don't take it out on me when you're upset. Who says I'm upset? I'm an adult, not a child. Once again, I urged him out. Go. We're divorced, don't disturb me. Peter chuckled bitterly. Every time I soothe you, it feels degrading. Sandy, I can't always be the one to yield. Never asked you to. I retorted. Past lingered menacingly. Emotions surged against control. Don't want to leave? Tell me, how will you help me get closure? Before he could answer, I interrupted. Back then, Betty said if worst came to worst, Ronald could apologize to me. If he'd done nothing wrong, why suggest apology? Let's see you get me an apology, since pursuing the truth wouldn't do me any good. Peter's eyes flinched for a moment. We didn't have enough evidence. Pursuing it would harm you. No good ever comes from this. I lost it and slapped him. Coward. Spineless wimp. Your wife gets bullied, and you don't even dare to fart in protest. He dodged while trying to calm me down. You need to chill. Years of resentment just exploded. you all pick on me because I got no parents, no family to back me up. Tears streamed down as I shook him off and grabbed Peter by the collar, landing another slap. So where's the accountability? Why didn't you do something sooner? He awkwardly dodged, getting hit a third time. Do you know why I don't want you touching me? Every time, it feels just as gross as being violated by Ronald. I was too worked up, panting and stumbling back against the wall, almost losing my balance. Peter reached out, half-heartedly trying to support me, paused, and drew his hands back. He closed his eyes and hit the table with his fist, growling, I'm not denying what you said, but you can't completely dismiss my efforts. I have to juggle work, care for you, and look after my parents. I've had my own struggles, and you never understand that. I shouted, so you ignore me getting bullied, so you can cheat openly? He was silent for a moment. I'm not with Ruby, she just has business value now. Get out. I wiped away tears and pointed to the door. Leave, or I'm calling the cops. We stared each other down for a moment before he turned to leave. Before shutting the door, I said, you didn't used to be this disgusting. Peter and his family always felt they treated me well, that they gave me enough love and support. No family could accept a daughter-in-law like me, and not many husbands would give as much as Peter. But from the moment they saw me as a burden, we were no longer equal. I got no respect, not even for my own kids. The drama with Jane is still boiling over. The police need time to investigate, but the online chatter won't stop. I keep off the internet and focus elsewhere. Peter starts showing up every day, hanging out downstairs if I don't let him in. He silently follows me when I go buy stuff or take out the trash. I ignore him, but we get snapped in the same frame, and these pics hit the net. Popular bloggers cash in on the chaos, analyzing and discussing Jane and me. Gossip accounts claim I'm a minor social media influencer kept by a rich guy. My DMs blow up with insults and sleazy jokes. Peter backs off for a bit, but one night, drunk, he calls me. Slurring, he asks, I don't get it, what do you really want? Aren't you afraid of what people say? Putting yourself out there, what good does it do? You want an apology, I've got the means now, I can make Ronald say sorry in person. Is that still not enough? Calmly, I reply, remember to bottle that morning piss and wash your face with it for a reality check. Finally, there's a break. Someone reports to the police. A third victim of Ronald comes forward. Ken tells me her situation is worse, from a single-parent family with little support. With help from a charity, she got rehab but faced worse abuse, exploited by Song Zhanxian for over a year. His sick habits preyed on her age and vulnerability. It breaks my heart to think how many Ronald hurt. Then the rumors fly about me as Peter and Ruby's third wheel. Peter attended Ruby's concert, and their solo photos appeared on Ruby's Facebook, sparking gossip. Earlier, a paparazzi snap of them shopping together with Andrew went viral. Despite being branded mystery boyfriend, the floodgates open. Ruby's fans, enraged, attack me online, calling and harassing me. After posting one video, I'm suddenly cast in all these roles. Even after changing my number, a text freaks me out. From an unknown sender, I know where you live, a mistress deserves to die. I laughed angrily at the idea of being cheated on and then called a mistress. Outrageous. The mob's accusations rose, but Ruby stayed silent. After contacting the police, I faced the camera again. Sitting there, memories of a decade with Peter flashed by. I hit the highlights, laid it all bare, and explained why I made the video. Peter cheated, Ruby knew it and still played along. I showed the divorce certificate. The video caused an uproar. While I faced slander, they stayed silent. Peter, a supposed devoted husband, and Ruby, a famous dancer. Eager netizens quickly dug deeper. They found gold. I divorced on the 12th, and on the 14th, Ruby was snapped grocery shopping with Peter. She posts about cooking on Facebook, thankful for the two who cleared their plates. The timeline shows more, like interviews where Ruby's coy about her love life, oozing happiness. Even then, Peter and I were married. The truth hits like a storm. Peter was once seen as a man of integrity, standing by his wife through thick and thin, from college to wedding bliss. Now, those stories just highlight the betrayal. No one knew that during the time I couldn't even leave the house, Peter was using my pain to boost his career and life. I never dared to read those interviews about him. I'd cried so many tears behind closed doors. He really did put in the effort, and he didn't lie. But I couldn't bear hearing myself being sold out by my husband before I even made it out of rock bottom. I broke my leg and accepted help, but it felt like I was beneath everyone from then on. The story began again, threading together my 10-year relationship with Peter, sexual harassment by an unethical doctor after my disability. And then, the husband who claimed to love me the most cheated, with none other than the doctor's niece. The internet blew up, Ruby's whole image crumbled overnight. Peter's company account was flooded with scathing comments. Her fans still argued it was two different matters. Soon, the police announced that Ronald was under investigation. That night, Betty called me. Usually so elegant, she sounded frantic. "Why are you stirring things up online? You should have known not to air your dirty laundry publicly, now everyone knows." I said, "It's your son who's shameful, not me cheating, so I don't mind people knowing." Betty was furious. "Hasn't Peter been good to you over the years? Do you want to ruin him with all this? Even if you resent him, think of the child. How's Andrew going to face his schoolmates now?" She accused me. "All his classmates will point at him, talking about having a mother like you." I sneered. "Perfect, it's a chance to teach Andrew the right values. What's the use of a son who doesn't love his mom?" I got more worked up, years of bottled up resentment flooding out. "Peter did a lot for me, I'm grateful, but I've lived up to him too. When clients ripped him off and he was struggling, you wouldn't help, and loans wouldn't come through. I used my parents' settlement money to cover it. When my mental health was at its worst, I couldn't even step outside the door. Your son went around telling people his wife was depressed and insecure after a car accident, claiming he was rebuilding my confidence daily. Everyone thought Peter was such a devoted husband." On the other end, Betty's voice weakened. "Why bring up the past now?" I asked her, "Isn't it only fair I fall down after being used as a stepping stone?" Betty stayed silent for a while. "Speak up, Betty." Then Peter's voice came on. "It's me." Watching the heavy rain outside, I took a deep breath. "You heard everything, didn't you? I'm so sick of you. I once loved you so much, now I loathe you just as deeply." Peter's voice was hoarse. "I know I've let you down, Sandy, but if you're willing to give me another chance." I interrupted. "No way." Ronald was arrested, and Ruby's image crumbled under public mockery. She deleted her essay about him, and under pressure from the public, she wrote a 300-word apology, ending with apologies to Jane and Ken. But the public wasn't satisfied, demanding she apologize to me. Meanwhile, Peter's company account and online store were boycotted and attacked by netizens. 3 days later, Peter opened a Facebook account to post an apology. He glossed over our situation, just saying sorry. Regarding Ruby, he offered no explanation. He mentioned their high school romance and how they reconnected once she returned to the country. As business partners, my relationship with him was long gone, but we hadn't legally divorced yet. It wasn't until the divorce that he and Ruby began experimenting with a romantic connection. Ruby also posted on Facebook, basically echoing Peter's message. Peter had sought another chance with me, realized it was hopeless, saw Ruby had business worth, and wasted no time stepping up. A 20-year-old Peter had never faced hardship. His first job was in a restaurant as a summer gig, washing dishes until his hands bled and cracked. He saved $6,000 over 2 grueling months to buy me a necklace. Now, Peter only sees profit and loss. People change, I get that, but he's turned into someone who despises me yet won't let me escape. He doesn't want me anymore but is too cowardly to forcefully seize me. We sleep separately. When he noticed my love for him fading, he repeatedly used Ruby to torment me, hoping to see me scurrying around like a dog afraid of abandonment. But unfortunately, the public wasn't fooled, and they slandered them more harshly. Sorting out the timeline, I posted Peter's Twitter photos, blurred out others' faces, and identified only him. I noted it was my idea to divorce, and recorded my phone call with Betty, releasing Peter's plea for a second chance. All marked with dates. When a woman suffers, a man shouldn't get away unscathed. I hope they cling to each other tightly and stop hurting anyone else. By the next time I talked about this, 2 years had passed. Traveling abroad, a curious young girl accompanying me asked about my past. She followed up, "What about the child?" I thought back. Peter's family was so mad at me, they cut off all Andrew's contact, canceled his number, didn't tell me when they switched his school. Andrew had a child's instinctive clinging to me, but under Peter's family's influence, he looked down on me, seeing his mom as a burden, overly dramatic, not as great as his dad. Kids are supposed to be my responsibility, but I couldn't be the mom I wanted to be. I couldn't expect him to be all understanding and caring in that kind of environment. I couldn't force certain rights or wrongs on him because the drama was never his to deal with in the first place. After Ronald was sentenced, I got a job interview invite from a former classmate. She had started her own company overseas. If I passed the interview, I'd have to work abroad for 5 years. Before leaving, I saw Andrew. I asked him one last time if he wanted to come with me. He asked, "Grandma says you messed up Dad. Is that true?" I patted his head. "No, I didn't do anything wrong," I said. Andrew hesitated for a while and then stepped back. He said, "Mom, I don't want to go with you." I had expected that. I hugged him goodbye. As the car started, Andrew watched me leave. After I had driven a bit, he suddenly started chasing the car, running hard. He fell, but got right back up. The whole street echoed with Andrew's heart-wrenching cries for his mom. The driver saw it in the rearview mirror and asked, "Do you want me to stop?" I wiped away tears and shook my head. If he didn't want to be with me, and I couldn't see myself biting the bullet for years just to parent a kid who held judgments against me, well, that was that. Our bond was just not that deep. A girl asked, "So what about now? Do you guys talk much? And your deadbeat ex, is he having a grand old time with his new fling?" I took a sip of coffee. Not quite. After Ruby's downfall, her career in entertainment took a big hit. She got boycotted online and hasn't reappeared on any shows. She went back to her dance group and apparently, a newbie took her spot. A year after everything happened, Peter's company started tanking. Poor decisions led to a failed project, and funds dried up. Peter was a mess back then, scrambling, and even begged me for money with a straight face. I hung up on him, though. Whenever I talked to Andrew, he seemed down and said Peter and Ruby fought a lot. Ruby changed, she'd argue with Betty and yell at the whole family, leaving Andrew really confused and upset. I didn't say much to comfort him. I just recalled all the times he used to rave about how great Ruby was. As the sun started to set, my story was wrapping up. 6 months ago, Peter declared bankruptcy and ran from his creditors. He got into a car wreck, broke his back, and the doctors said he wouldn't walk again. A girl exclaimed, "Karma is real." And what about that mistress of his? She left him within a month, cursing him out as a jinx in the hospital room. Last month, a drunk Peter called me through Andrew's phone. He cried and reminisced, asking if I'd ever look back. I didn't even finish listening and hung up. As I was getting ready to leave, a little kid tumbled past me and fell. I stood up, instinctively wanting to help, but then heard the kid's parents say, "Don't help, let him get up by himself." The kid was about to cry, but seeing no one coming over, he got up, looked at his parents for approval, and they cheered him on. He smiled and started running again. As I left the restaurant, I imagined hearing voices behind me, like someone saying, "Don't worry, if you fall, just get back up, dust yourself off, and keep going. It's no big deal. Sandy's got this." I didn't dare look back. That was my parents' support. If they're watching from above, they'd be proud. On this rocky road of life, even with a limp, I finally learned to walk on my own.